with meta-crisis, we are saying that crises are intersecting, but our capacity to solve them is also reaching its limits. The Indic response to the meta-crisis, which is a civilizational challenge, is not only one of exceptionalism, but saying, hey, what becomes available to us when we look at this like a cycle, like a Yuga? And a lot of things become available as a cycle. Ancestral wisdom becomes available because, hey, this may be the first time, but there are codified messages passed on to us from religious texts and wisdom traditions. I really feel a new brain and a neocortex of humanity is coming on. I mean, so much of what we know is being broken away, and so many assumptions that we've lived by are being tested. And what if our deep relationships together are the landing pad consciousness is looking for, so that something can be born, which no one mind or heart can hold? Where some of these answers, these ideas will land, they'll be intuited. One of the ways to make sense of what's going on in India at this moment is from a very archetypical and deeper historic arc. Radha and Krishna are the eternal love affair. Once Radha starts feeling envious of Krishna's flute, because she says that I also meet you only time to time, but your flute is always with you. So you love the flute more than me. Then Krishna smiles and says,
Hi, my name is Dave, and this is the Light Forest Podcast, a journey of exploration to bring more light into how we live and regenerate our planet. Welcome to the Light Forest Podcast. I'm your host Dave, and together we go for long walks in the forest with changemakers from around the world, engaging in deep and reflective conversations at the intersections of planetary crisis, inner transformation, and system change. Over the course of Season 0, we've spoken to many guests touching on civilization history, planetary health, climate change, and approaches to system change. You may be familiar with the term the meta-crisis, referring to the interconnected nature of our ecological collapse, social fragmentation, financial crisis. Today, we're going to explore this with a fresh lens, and joining us to take us on this journey is Abhishek Thakore. Abhishek is the co-author of a recent report, Bodhi Sangha, an Indian response to the meta-crisis, a collection of 15 voices rooted in Indic worldviews. The report brings together many of his journeys as an explorer of edges, bridge across different worlds, and a purpose-driven initiator. With over 20 years of facilitation experience, Abhishek has worked with over 50 organizations in various sectors around the world. He's also founder of the Blue Ribbon Movement and co-founder of WisdomTree and the Bodhi Sangha ecosystem, probably one of the most fresh and transformational mycelium-like networks in India today. His work includes policy, programs, and practice across many levels, from hyperlocal to global. I'm from Bombay or Mumbai, the same city where Abhishek is from, but my paths have taken me across many other cultures and worlds, so I'm really looking forward to this walk and chat with insights into my own roots. So with that, Abhishek, welcome to the podcast.
Namaste, and thank you for having me.
Namaste, indeed. Thank you for joining. I'm super excited. Before we go anywhere, as we stand on the metaphorical edge of the forest, how are you this morning, and how's the monsoon in Bombay these days?
I'm very good. I love the rains, honestly. Like, it makes my heart dance when it rains. I feel very connected to life and nature. The rains in Bombay have been at a nice pace. Different parts of India have been suffering with seasonal rains, which have been torrential, which have been floods. Thankfully, Bombay, not so much, just a few days of waterlogging, which is par for the course. So yeah, it's been a good morning. How are you doing today morning?
Yeah, lovely. I've had a slightly longer morning than you, as it's 11:30 here in Thailand, and I've been anticipating our conversation. So I'm really glad to get started. So I think our paths will go many ways, but maybe like the starting seed can be to help unpack for us what you mean by weaving an Indic response to civilization crisis or the meta crisis. Yeah, help us understand and unpack that.
Yeah, each term in that phrase is so rich and there is so much there. And I'm trying to wonder what would be essentially what we are saying with each of those words, right? So with meta-crisis, we are saying that the crises are intersecting, but our capacity to solve them is also reaching its limits. So it's a meta-crisis because there is a poly-crisis, the intersecting crisis, and then all of that together is at a level of complexity, and our ability to make sense is also reaching its limits, and therefore a crisis of crisis, right? So there is a meta-crisis. We're all facing it in lives in different ways, socially, globally. So there is a meta-crisis. We're all a part of it. And I feel there is one view on the meta-crisis which looks at it as an exceptional time, right? Like never before have we had the power of gods without the wisdom to steward it. And this is like an exceptional time in humanity, its history, and, our existence at humanity level is threatened. And there is a sense of exceptionalism in that thinking. Like this is special. This is a special time. And that is true. And yet and that I would call kind of an approach that comes a lot from the West. And what we're saying is, yes, that is true. And this is cyclical. And that again and again in life, in nature, there are cycles of creation and destruction at multiple levels simultaneously. And the real question to answer is not only how do we quote unquote save humanity or the planet, but what is my dharma? What is an action that enlivens me, the other, in the context, right? What's my calling? Doesn't have an exact translation, but what is my calling and what is the calling of the times? So when we say an Indic response, and we've thought a lot about why are we so kind of focused on India and Indic, right? Because somebody from the integral theory world may say it's a very blue kind of, nation state kind of fixation and that they're kind of, signaling something else. But really the heart of India and Indic that we're using is a non-zero sum game played on scale. So there is native and tribal wisdom, of course, and the Indic wisdom actually is an extension of paganism, nature worship, and really native first people values. What is interesting about the Indic civilization is that these values have been taken, codified, and run on a scale for an extended period of time. And so there is an accumulated memory, there is wisdom, and there is a way of living with each other and with nature in harmony. There's a lived memory of that. So when we say Indic, like what is the Indian or the Indic response? You're saying a response that comes from thousands of years of coexistence, broad coexistence with nature and with each other in ways that are fulfilling to life, right? Non-extractive ways. So the Indic response to the meta-crisis, which is a civilizational challenge because it manifests also at many levels. Meta-crisis manifests at all levels. So the Indic response is not only one of exceptionalism, but saying, hey, what becomes available to us when we look at this like a cycle, like a Yuga, like a Kali Yuga. And a lot of things become available as a cycle. Ancestral wisdom becomes available because, hey, this may be the first time, but there are codified messages passed on to us from religious texts and wisdom traditions, for example. Really, the question of what am I called to, right? What is my Yuga dharma, not swadharma? Like I see a lot of people saying, hey, this is my dharma, swadharma. But I'm saying the calling of the times is inviting all of us to go beyond our swadharma. It's asking us to be who we are not, because that's what the calling of the times is, right? And pretty much like Arjun and Mahabharata had to go beyond what he thought was right and wrong to respond to the context. I think we're all being called to go beyond. So it also brings in the personal, the inner, not only the outer. And hence the Indic response to the meta-crisis would not probably center so much around how do we solve this. Not only that, but what am I called to do? And what am I standing on, and how do I respond to this crisis? What is a contextual response to this? So somewhere there.
Yeah, that's a nice painting you've just sort of painted for us. Certainly, the thing that sits for me, as I've also read about the meta crisis, and most of the writers or the people who speak about it are speaking from, I would say, mostly also non-Asian contexts. And I definitely get the feeling of this anxiousness of this is the only time, we have to solve it, the sense of collapse, the sense of like doom and gloom. But what I hear you say is that when you see history moving in cycles, and when you see, as you say, there's coded messages passed on, for centuries and thousands of years, it reminds you that perhaps everything is not totally new, and that there are roots and seeds that can be brought in from the past. And it's interesting you mentioned also we're called to be in this, you called to be who we are not. I find that to be quite a fascinating point, because how do we be who we are not? And that can be very perplexing. How would you unpack that for us?
Unpack it at two levels, right? So first is the swadharma, finding what is our calling. And there's a lot of focus on finding what's your calling and your ikigai and, what are you good at. And passionate about, and so on. And we all are in that zone. I think what the times are calling us to do, though, in my sense, is to say that's great, but are you also willing to be what you're not? Do things, not things that you only would stick to and love to do, but do things, do what it takes. I think, are you willing to do what it takes to respond to the times, right?
Mm.
So, for example, for me, for the longest time, I've had a solid judgment with the extractive structures of the world, right? The corporations, the government, and the whole period of my life where I'm like, no, we'll create alternatives on the fringes, and those alternatives will become mainstream, and that's kind of the vision.
Yeah.
And now I'm realizing that the times are urgent, and it's a luxury to sit back and kind of just be on the fringe. One has to get into the muck of, so to speak, life and society. And the same people that I would have judged 5 or 10 years ago are now friends. And I'm like, can I drop these judgments? Because that
Mm.
moral high ground is very precious to me. It's in fact a part of my identity that I am not them.
Mm.
Am I willing to drop that and reach out to them and say, hey, I've judged you? And I've had these conversations with people heart to heart saying, I've judged you so much. And today we are sitting face to face and I see what you're trying to do. It's not very different from what I'm trying to do. And can we work together? So what Manish Jain calls unholy alliances, right? How do we build these unholy alliances in today's day and age and drop some of these ideas that we love? So this is just one example, but similarly at a personal level, not only judgment, but skills and capacities, right? I can say, well, I'm good at this, so I won't build that skill.
Mm.
I'm like, okay, no, you need to probably raise resources. You need to be detail oriented. You need to do work at a certain level of rigor. So things that got us here, even at a humanity level won't get us there.
Mm.
Right. So I think that's the invitation. And that's the most exciting thing about these times, that you just can't quote unquote get away with ikigai. That
Yeah.
was great, but the times are saying, okay, break your ikigai and see what's needed and like go beyond your ikigai, right? And
Mm.
show up for the world, show up for what needs to be done. Often what needs to be done need not coincide with the ikigai, right? Because everybody wants to do the comfortable, the nice things, but there's a bunch of things nobody wants to do, right? Nobody wants
Mm.
to take power and be a politician and lead, for example, right? Everybody wants to. So yeah, I think that's kind of what's interesting. The times are calling us to be who we are not also.
Yeah, I definitely want to go into how you yourself have grown and transformed. And it's interesting to hear you talk about, these judgments of, I think we all have them, and it keeps us sometimes our identity intact. And in some ways, dropping the judgments can feel like a violation of our own identity. But you've made this transition. I mean, I think you've been working in the civil society, NGO space for several decades, and you've really built up like a vast network, a mycelium-like network of so many different organizations across so many different sectors, which are really, really cool. I want to bring us maybe a little bit back to continue unpacking that Indic response. And one of the things that sort of strike me also is the Indic mind, which you've talked about as being a little bit different from perhaps minds elsewhere. And why an Indic view of this meta-crisis or these urgent times can be quite powerful. What would you say if you were to crystallize some of the core parts of what makes up the Indic mind?
Yeah, this is where it gets a little tricky. I mean, the Indic mind, the decolonized mind, the mind that belongs to indigenous people, first people. So there is but I'll focus more on the Indic mind in its ability to hold paradoxes for one. I mean,
Mm.
life and not hold paradoxes and judgments as double standards and hypocrisy, but like really be comfortable with the gray, be comfortable with the ambiguity,
Yeah.
be comfortable with simultaneity, right? Like in India, as you know, like so there's so much ambiguity, so much
Yeah.
chaos, and yet within that chaos there is like it's like life,
Yeah.
right? So I think the Indic mind at its surface level is able to hold paradoxes, deal with ambiguity, deal with chaos, and so on. And I think the deeper layers on that mind is that the collective mind has had a long time to evolve. It has had thousands of years to evolve, and it has evolved in a land of abundance, essentially. So the last 1,000 years were difficult, but several thousand years before that were broadly abundant. The Indic plateau is Indo-Gangetic plateau, and it's a fertile land, space of abundance, and that gives time for contemplation, that gives time to ask deeper questions about life, that
Mm.
gives valuing human relationships, the human to nature relationships also, treating everything with a sense of sacredness, right? In India,
Mm.
there could be a rock below a tree and somebody comes and, paints it crimson as Hanumanji. And before you know it, like, okay, people really are willing to look at that rock in a sacred way. And before you know it, there's a small temple there, because sacredness is not kind of only localized into certain spot. Like life is sacred. Somebody's feeding a cow, and we don't realize it unless we see it from the outside, saying how the sense of sacredness pervades the culture through the festivals and through just life itself. And when we look at life in a sacred way, then we honor it. We honor all forms of life, and we see the interconnectedness that we all have. Because when you honor something, you honor your ancestors. Right now, there is what's called Vriddha Shraddh. It's an observance of all our ancestors passing away. So it's a fortnight where you kind of observe your ancestors and remember them and feed people. So it's codified within the culture to remember ancestors. Now, you could say scientifically they're dead and they don't exist, but there's a cultural respect for what they got us. So the culture has all this codified within itself. And therefore, the mind it creates is a very different mind. And today, that mind is definitely colonized in a big way. Today, it mimics the West. And yet, there is still some lived memory. There is still some lived memory of deep intimacy, of family, of collective beings, right? Being a collective being, not just being an individualistic being. And finally, this mind has the ability to assimilate things without getting converted or erased, right? Like, for example, Christianity arrived into India, and when you look at the variants of Mother Mary in India, no, Mata Vilankini, and then you'll see a temple to Mata Vilankini, which is kind of a hybrid of a church and a temple, right? And I mean, you could argue either way, saying, oh, this is too much missionary work and all. But what is interesting is the culture can absorb and digest without shifting. Its capacity to digest is a lot. It will take it in, assimilate it, and continue, because it's like a mature, grown-up person, right? And I think that's the capacity that's valuable. And I think in today's day and age, India really has a chance to kind of put forth a non-zero-sum game for the world. I feel our leaders are really trying to talk about non-alignment, trying to build alliances, engaging multipolar ways, and saying, hey, the world doesn't need to be a binary. It can be a multipolar world, right? So I think the Indic mind at a collective level also can probably lead the way in breaking this whole race to the bottom between nation states.
Yeah, I mean, when you talked about the ability to really process and digest and take in so many different cultures, I'm also reminded by a previous guest I've had on, Rajni, who talked about the manthan or the churning, which is how the process of how ghee is made, and just how like in both history as a sort of churning like trend, but also India as this churning of so many different cultures, which is quite unique, especially like if even we look around Asia, where it seems like that kind of diversity is rare, especially within one part. So looking at, going back to the moment of our time and where we are, I think time and history and the cyclical patterns is quite interesting. You talked about the different yugs, and perhaps right now, as you write in the report, we are in the Kali Yuga. What does that tell us about where we are and who we must be in this moment? Like in the past, I've had on guests who've also talked about, the cyclical pattern and this idea that, especially that as we move from one, let's just say, a cycle of history to the next one, our ways of knowing shift, which is a very like a epistemological, ontological shift, which, as you said, we have to be who we are not. So, yeah, how would you describe and see this shift, and how do you see this point in time?
It's an amazing point in time. A friend called me recently, co-traveler, and said, I'm feeling quite hopeless. And I said, why are you feeling hopeless? This is the best time, because I tend to be on the optimist side of the spectrum. He's like, how's it the best time? So I said, a dramatic blockbuster is going on, and you don't only have the front row tickets, you're starring in that blockbuster on the side of, on the underdog side, and you have to steal the culture, you have to move. And like, what joy to be able to say that, hey, we saw the internet and the rise of AI and faced a time of intensifying crisis, and we were together at that time, right? So I'm like, we're all warrior souls who've taken birth, who purchased these front row tickets of being in this time, right? And each of us, I'm saying. So just to be able to recognize that we're all these warrior souls in today's time, in these intense times, we've chosen to be here. I feel at a deep level, our souls have chosen to be and to find each other, right? Like we find each other, we don't have to go over a 20-year process of being friends. We just energetically know we're vibing at the same level. We are the tribe.
Yeah.
right? And so it's a very exciting time for our tribe. We're finding each other. We're saying, hey, what the hell is going on? And I always have this image of a big monkey fight, an ape fight is going on, and a few apes are able to climb to the top and like scratch their head saying, what the hell is going on? Like, why are we doing it this way, right? And I feel like we're those apes who've been able to, in some ways, by creating surplus in their lives or by living their lives in a way that there is spare time to reflect, there is enough security and safety to think longer term, intergenerational, planetary. We're now able to start saying, hey, what the hell is going on? I really feel a new brain and a neocortex of humanity, like a neocortex is coming on. And I feel it in some ways coincides with the rise of AI, in the sense that I feel using integral, like when something happens in the lower right, something happens in the lower left also, right?
Yeah.
When human beings invent fire, psychological safety goes up because now suddenly there is fire, so I can fight animals and I can keep warm and so on. So it does something psychologically. And I feel all this innovation that's happening, I think psychologically at a consciousness level, it's also creating a group mind, a group kind of almost a fabric around the planet, which is being able to imagine something beyond what human beings are being able to imagine. We are a part of that. This podcast is a part of that unfolding. Like, it's happening right now.
Yeah.
Right. And what a joy to be in this moment and to be participants in this evolutionary process, right at the heart of it. So
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful time for humanity. I mean, so much of what we know is being broken away, and so many assumptions that we've lived by are being tested. And like I said, like for spirits like us, this is ideal conditions to like fully come on board and say, let's do this.
Mm.
So while it's a very difficult and painful time, even I'm not at all discounting the sheer amounts of pain and suffering that's around us, and it deeply, deeply affects me, and I'm sure it affects all of us. It just doesn't feel right. It feels like not under our watch, right? Not when it's our time, not when we're kind of participants of this world. So it is very difficult. It is a very difficult time. We are accelerating out of control. There is deep hopelessness. And what better conditions for heroes to emerge, right? Like you need like these intense conditions for people to emerge and to connect across, right? Like this is the level of intensity and difficulty that will allow the emergence of this fabric of us, right?
Mm.
And so in a way, I'm saying this is a great time because this heat, this intensity, this destruction is going to surface a bunch of people and networks who are going to find each other and who are going to sense into what wants to be born. And actually, without knowing the whole picture, like ants in an ant hill, right? You just know a few things. I just know, okay, if Dave reaches out, let's do the podcast. I don't know how this is going to ripple in, right? And you're like, okay, Rajni connected me to Abhishek, let's do it. So like we're doing this whole figuring this out as we go. Nobody has a plan, nobody knows.
Yeah.
But I have deep conviction, and that conviction is only increasing, that these times are giving rise to this bunch of us, and it's great. I think I feel we'll be able to navigate ourselves into a much better place for all of us. Yeah.
Wow. The vibes are flowing.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the field is growing. No, I love I love this very I don't even I hesitate to even say positive. I just love this high frequency kind of view of things. It certainly resonates with my feeling as well of wanting to do light forest, which is to imagine and to create the world around me that I feel I want to live in. And that power of that choice, and that every relationship you make and every action you make is actively creating the world that you live in. And you surfaced like also the hardship of the times, and that's certainly important to recognize. And speaking to some people, that some people and I myself also sometimes feel that hopelessness, and there's a feeling of freeze, like nothing makes sense anymore. The United States Department of Defense is now the Department of War. Like every day there are things that just a few years ago would seem like a joke is now present. Yet what I also hear from you is like a deep profound acceptance that everything is the way it is. Everything is as it was meant to be because it cannot be any other way, because it is showing up as it is. And that feels to me connecting back to maybe some of this Indic mind that you've started to introduce to us, of like this acceptance of the paradoxes, acceptance of maybe opposites existing at the same time, and seeing that the only way we can start to move and have fun, like play and be the warrior, is to accept things as they are and start to navigate and start to shift and in some ways suspend our assumptions our conditioned assumptions about how things should be, and that's opening things up.
Yeah, I mean, a part is acceptance. I think a part is just seeing with different eyes,
Mm,
right? So we notice the monoliths and the megaliths very easily because they're amplified and our attention is aggregated around them. And in that, we miss thousands and millions of acts of kindness and podcasts and things of hope, and goodness is scattered, I think, and it's very hard to amplify because it's so much everywhere.
mm,
It's not like one big kind of good, right? The so to speak evil is easy to kind of say, hey, the US did this, but maybe today in this moment there are hundreds of such conversations happening in the world who are all finding alternatives, but that doesn't, we don't see, I somehow feel even those of us who are in change making don't see the goodness that is also flowing, and it's actually balancing all the
mm,
evilness, right? And there are walks that are being done for peace, and there's a lot happening, right? So I think
mm,
one is acceptance, like you said, that this is a cycle of nature. If there is evil, there will be good, opposites exist. The other is also opening our eyes to seeing, hey, there is so much good also that is happening, not in a naive kind of optimist positive thinking way, but from an appreciative gaze, right?
mm,
Saying, hey, can I divide my attention at least equally, if not more, to the positive? Can
mm,
I look at all the beautiful glimpses and things that are happening, and can I be grateful to that? Can I come from fullness?
mm,
Can I not come from lack and frustration and anger and hopelessness, because then that's what I'll create in the world? But
mm,
can I come from deep appreciation of life and see how it's flowing through all kinds of forms, including through us? And I feel there is something about coming from that space,
mm,
the space of abundance, the space of joy, not as fake thinking, but through deep appreciation that life is still finding ways. It's like on that concrete building also, that branch of tree will kind of erupt,
yeah,
and you're like, see, life finds ways, even in the
yeah,
most dead places like Chernobyl now, if you see, it's a forest. Like life has a way to find through the cracks, and that's happening. So I think,
mm,
yeah, so I would say definitely that. The advantage of being a mycelial network, and I see all of us, including you, part of this network, is that you connected to the whole forest. So you
yeah,
don't only see the big trees, right? You see everything, and it's relayed. So like, hey, it's not as bad. Like you're relaying, and you're like, it's not. It's there is enough good also that is going on. There's suffering, but there is good.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's something that this opens up. Yeah.
Hmm. Maybe this is a nice segue to talk a little bit about, maybe through your work as well, how you've been, your theory of change. As you've been building out organizations, movements. I read out your bio at the start, for more than 2 decades. And theory of change is something that's, definitely a part of every institution that thinks about how do I make change. And I'm quite struck by, the words that you use, things like relational fields, deepening the resonant field, creating the space. And you just talked right now about coming from the space of abundance as being a really critical ingredient for us. So can you talk a little bit more about like your theories of change, how it's what it is right now, and maybe how it's grown and developed over time through some of the work that you've been doing?
Yeah. I think the starting point for my theory of change is a very subjective experience, right? Of the ego function, for the want of a better word, right? There is this phenomenon that shows up all the time, shows up sneakily. And as we were doing the grounding function, we were kind of calming it and dropping it so that we could be in the present. And yet, in the smallest, subtlest moment, it could come saying, hey, Dave is like outclassing me and I need to be cleverer and I need to kind of talk over him. And it can sneak in any time, in any way. And this function in our psyche is like, that is the dysfunction, because that kind of, builds concepts and plans and images and ideas. And then when things don't match up, there is a gap, there is violence, you're fighting with reality and everything because you have these bunch of ideas. So there is an ego function which is operating within all of us, or at least within me. I
Yeah.
can talk about me because my subjective experience I'm an authority on. The pathway to dealing with that is not only isolation. I've figured, like, it's not that I just do vipassana or I just retreat. Relationships are the place where it really gets tested, right? Like everybody is a saint until you ask their spouse. That's like the real report card, right? Because it's in relationships and the friction of relationships that this ego kind of surfaces and can be dealt with.
Yeah.
Because coexistence is the oldest problem of humanity. Like, we've not been able to coexist, like, to be honest, right? And that's because this function's kind of gone out of whack. Its
Mm,
job is to kind of physically take care of us, but it also has taken on psychological functions and created conceptual kind of psychic fears and psychic thoughts and ideas. It needs to be reined back in. And the way to rein it in is not using itself, but to disrupt it the way, say, we disrupt it through a meditative process. But the most powerful way I've found is relationship. Because when we say, for example, after this podcast, when we sit with each other and say, hey, Dave, when you said that, I felt a little triggered, or say, hey, that came up when you said, and I was feeling uncomfortable. That's when we clear up with each other.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where then we're able to rest. And together with each other, we discover a deeper layer. Right. We discover a layer which is not just intellectual, but more authentic. And we discover our real interconnectedness. Now, when you and I discover this interconnectedness, then our relationship becomes like this high frequency kind of inner net connection where a lot can travel, right? We're already a good connection because we got connected via kind of a common, so to speak, friend routing us. So we're already on the network, but we take our connection, from dial up to fiber optic, right? Lot can, I think that's where the ego gets reined in, and that creates a clearing for new things to be born. And that clearing doesn't belong to you or me. It belongs to the space that got created between us. And that space is so potent, especially when we're able to lean into it with safety and trust. And I've personally experienced this, right? When we're able to vibe deeply, we're able to birth things. I'm like, imagine what would happen when we start building a field of relationships that's at that depth.
Yeah.
Right. And then it would create this landing pad for consciousness. That's the phrase I use. In this, I'm reminded of this game I used to play, SimCity 2000, the game. And there, you have to create an airport. So you do 2x2 tiles and the airport doesn't come online. Then you do 3x3 tiles of the airport. There's no flight. But the moment it becomes a 4x4, then you realize that was the minimum needed for the airport to happen. Right. And I'm like, what if the answers to the future need to land and they don't have a landing pad right now?
Yeah.
And what if our deep relationships together are the landing pad consciousness is looking for, so that something can be born, which no one mind or heart can hold? And therefore, then this work, like this podcast, is a part of building that field.
Yeah.
Where some of these answers, these ideas will land. They'll be intuited, not out of one mind, but out of a web of relationships, right? So the theory of change begins with the whole ego function. It says that relational fields and relationships are where they're best dealt with.
Yeah.
And there one can double click on that, saying, in relationships, you would be non-violent, dialogue, work with full consent, understand deeply. So the whole piece there.
Yeah.
But then relational fields, well, this can land. And when this lands, we don't know what will land, but we know that having a relational field will at least open the possibility.
Yeah.
So I always say, I don't know what's the car, but I know roads will be required. So let's build roads. What's the car? This is the road. When that happens, if we have a community that can act in coordinated ways, not in a centralized directive way, acting in their context, but from a coordinated energetic signal, then we have a meta-crisis response, because the problem's so complex that you need all the solutions and you need them coordinated in a way, and no one person can coordinate, no one government, no one corporation. The only thing I feel that can coordinate is this interconnected network of us, which is deeply held in relationships and faith, right? So kind of that I would say is the theory of change. Each of us realizing that, hey, this ego function is whacking our life, building enough surplus so that we can deal with the ego function, relational fields, landing, coordinated action, and sense making to respond.
Wow. I'm just letting that land.
Sure. Yeah. And it was very compressed, but yeah, I think that's, yeah.
Yeah, because certainly, and I like that you started with your own experience and started with the ego before we get into grand talking about systems and very complex things. Because really, it's starting with ourselves and dealing and with the ego. But as you say, through relationships, we get to unveil more and more and see more and more what is left to be cleaned up still. And it's certainly a challenge in the social change work where there's a lot of minds, and sometimes it's just a lot of minds bumping against each other. I can certainly resonate with sometimes the search for recognition, the search for image, the search for status, all these sort of things that bump up against each other. But yeah, starting with the ego, as you say, and sort of allowing that to minimize over time. In building the Bodhisangha ecosystem, it sounds like it's been not something that's happened overnight, it's happened over several years, perhaps 14 or 15 or even 20 years, which is quite amazing, because today There are a lot of movements that come about that perhaps they don't have that maturity of that time to build the relationship field as you talk about. I can just maybe bring up a quick example, for instance, which is like, in the crypto or the Web3 space, which is a space that I'm also have like sort of one arm in. And there's a decentralized movement there, and they really, have really beautiful, powerful visions for a decentralized technology stack. But often maybe what might be missing is that really strong relationship field that allows the true human coordination to happen, because without that, it's just egos bumping against each other, with that scarce and lack mindset, which doesn't allow that the plane to land, if you will, doesn't
Yeah.
allow the tech to land. Yeah, I mean, I myself am sort of growing seeds for movements that I would say have a lot of resonance with everything you talked about. What would you say would be like what you've learned, in building these relationship fields, building these movements over time, regards to how to grow them, how to nurture them, the ways that which you are able to fundraise, the ways that you're able to really like tackle some of these core issues. And maybe you want to bring a couple of examples
Yeah.
from Blue Ribbon or other
Yeah.
organizations.
I think the first thing I would say is what I have realized is "Saw naam ek kaam." Hundreds of names, but the work is one. And if you're able to look beneath the names and see that we're all serving the same energetic force, right? And for the longest time, Blue Ribbon has tried to be the quote unquote unselfish organization,
Mm.
right? By which we mean that we're happy to show up for others, collaborate with others, not kind of hold boundaries very tightly and grow ourselves, but really set an example for saying, hey, what does solidarity and showing up look like? What is it if we allow our surpluses to flow into other ecosystems, right? So at the moment, we're doing an incubator in Mumbai with young people, for ideas, social change ideas. It's not our incubator. It's somebody, Shiv Sagar Apte Foundation started that incubator 3 years ago. And we have a large youth network, right? So as an org like us, there is a choice saying, hey, why don't we start our own incubator? Right? Or why don't we just collaborate, right? Why not just have a collaborative partnership? But what is it to make that incubator our own and to show up saying, hey, this is ours now and we'll do this together? Of course, it requires on the other side a person who's also not scarcity minded and generous and not attached to their name. And we really we've adopted, this is for the first time, we're like, let's adopt something. Let's not start for a change. Let's co-create and co-parent this into its next phase, right?
Mm.
So that we're trying to live out that generosity of spirit, right? Because every org wants to be big, every org wants to be the solution. Like for me, for example, Bodhi Sangha wants to be just like every other ecosystem, wants to be the ecosystem that does the sense making for the meta-crisis. But that
Yeah.
is the longing at the heart of every ecosystem to be important. And can we show up for each other's ecosystems?
Mm.
Not just try to pull everybody into our, because everybody's trying to do that, even in the social change world, right? You show up for mine, you come under my banner. And I'm like, can we break that race to the bottom? It's another variant of the same race to the bottom, right? Like my idea, my agenda, my theory of change. And I'm like, can we release that a bit?
Mm.
And to do that, I think we have to lean into relationships, trust, and even generosity. Really generous. Like, can we be generous with each other?
Mm.
Not be petty, be like, oh, I want to extract, right?
Yeah.
Because, like I said, this ego function is so sneaky that it shows up even in our sector, in our relationships, and in the space. Right? And I have a few markers. Whenever I see something is, more obsessed with itself, dedicated to its own survival, being extractive, wanting to
Mm.
live on forever, I'm like, wherever this is located, this is the same phenomenon showing up, because
Yeah.
we've created structures outside which replicate our inner ego function, including sometimes the sense of urgency, the misplaced sense. I mean, times are extremely urgent, and perhaps that's where we have to be even more still and centered, right?
Yeah.
But this urgency, and particularly like urgency that I want to see change in my lifetime. That's it.
Mm.
Before I die, I want to make something happen. I'm like, yeah, maybe that's a little bit of like you want to see this and not participate, the circle of life and so on. So I think relational fields, to come back to, sorry, that was a segue, but to come back to your question, I think recognizing this ego function and when it sneaks up
Mm.
in our collectives, and it sneaks up all the time, like just as we have to brush every day and clean up every day. I think psychically we need to keep cleaning up this. It
Yeah.
shows up in such pathetic ways, that even as I speak about this, I find like, oh, I'm feeling like all proud that I have figured it out. And again, that function's so sneaky that it comes in and says, oh, Abhishek,
Yeah.
the guy who's figured the ego function. But that's not. So I'm like, hey, caught you again. right? Like because it's such a
Live on
until
podcast.
sorry, yeah,
Caught live on
caught
podcast.
live on podcast, right? Like look, because it's such a sneaky bugger, right? Until we're like in that whatever enlightened state, and again, I feel like those states, it's easy to achieve those states on the mat, right, away
Mm.
from civilization. But we are saying we need to locate off the mat into the society, right? I feel our Yug Dharma is not to retreat only into caves, and full power to people who are doing that. We need those, but for a lot
Yeah.
of us, the Yug Dharma is to show up in
Mm.
the society and live our spirituality in the society, right?
Mm.
And so coming back to relational fields, I always say, with my partner, I always say like, if two people can coexist deeply, honestly, in harmony, working through their differences, then there is hope for like a Israel Palestine or a Ukraine Russia. Like right now, I feel where humanity is even for two people to coexist deeply, authentically,
Yeah.
is so hard because this
Yeah.
ego function, the same dynamics that are happening there show up in our interpersonal spaces, right? The same
Yeah.
violence, the same aggression, the same competition, envy, disappointments, hurt. So can we work with those as they show up?
Yeah.
And they will show up in any two people's relationship, right? So the fields are a lot of, so to speak, dirty work.
Mm.
Like working through these things. So they're very uncomfortable. It's damn uncomfortable to be vulnerable. It's extremely uncomfortable to be honest and authentic about these things.
Yeah.
And yet that's what creates the secret sauce of coordination, right? And with Bodhisangha, what we've been able to do at a very small scale at the moment, but now we're learning that technology, is to really clear up at a deeper and deeper level with each other so that we may be able to sense better, right?
Can, can you
Yeah.
share some more practical
Yeah.
things that you've been doing? I'm really curious to see like the kind of practices.
Yeah. So one, for example, since you mentioned fundraising, right? So we don't think of ourselves as fundraising, but as a resourcing ecology. So we are saying like traditional fundraising would have a donor and a project.
Yeah.
But we are saying a resourcing ecology would be like a forest, right? Where there would be some money from client fees, some membership, crowdfunding, enterprises. And can we pool in that financial capital and also pull in social capital, cultural, spiritual capital? And then can we share amongst ourselves authentically and from a space of abundance? So this is an entirely different paradigm from donor salary project. This is resourcing ecology, and we're inviting the donor also into the ecology as somebody who is bringing something. But we're saying, hey, can we be in relationship? And can
Mm.
our relationship just not hinge on financial capital?
Yeah.
Can we really deeply relate to each other? Because if relationships are the response, then we need to start here. Then we need to not be transactional and replicate the same power dynamic. So that would be an example of saying it's very easy and convenient to design in narrow, linear ways, right? And slice things.
Yeah.
Building a resourcing ecology is like building the light forest of multiple capitals in a way, right?
Mm.
Takes a lot of time and patience. But once it comes online, it's resilient. So another example of this would be Blue Ribbon. Blue Ribbon's fellowship doubled in size, right? So we had 25 fellows working in 25 communities, and that went to about 75 at 3x in size. We did the largest citizen survey in Mumbai, and in India, 1,300 people were polled. And then we realized that our donor hadn't renewed their grants.
Okay.
Right. And we realized, oh shit, we were actually out of money. Like the money hadn't come in. So
Yeah.
at the same time, money stopped and the fellowship size doubled with the youth energy, and the young people wanted to take it. And we're like, wow, this is the strength of our ecology. We don't realize this,
Mm.
but it is not running on financial capital. In fact, when financial capital dries out,
Mm.
other capitals kick in and this volunteer energy leads it to double, right? Now, where would you hear this story that funding dried up and the enterprise doubled? Like it sounds like a it's miraculous, but it's
Yeah.
miraculous because we built an ecology which is nourished over so long that it doesn't deplete like that just because one form of capital is taken away. So that would be another example of that kind of depth of work. And then of course there's abundance in the universe. Money does come in. It got us also surprised. We were at a trustees meeting and we were presenting and we were like, whoa, we didn't realize this, that these two things happen simultaneously, right? So that would be another. Yet another example would be these Artivist ashrams that we do, right? So
Mm.
we come together, we say, let's meet in our home space in 6 days for 100 hours, agenda less, and let's just allow what wants to emerge through us, because agendas occupy space
Yeah.
very often, right? But if you meet agenda less, then what really needs to emerge? There is an intent, but there's no agenda. So you're allowing what wants to emerge. You're creating space. And most meetings and gatherings don't do that, right? They always have agenda. Where is space for the future to show up? If you've already rigged the game with your own present self and past conditioned mind, where is the future going to show up, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know if this kind of, and yeah, I think the last example I would give is the example of server anumati, right? Decision making with full consent. So we take decisions with consent of each other in Vinoba Bhave's tradition. And then also Occupy Wall Street and other movements have kind of taken on the consent based decision making.
Okay.
So yeah, so we say decisions will be taken, at least the key decisions will take consent of everybody involved. It will
Yeah.
not be centralized. It will be, even if it takes time, we'll do the work it takes to build that collective decision making. So these would be some examples of
Yeah.
how this gets lived.
Yeah, thanks for sharing these examples. It's really nice to see the different facets. I mean, you mentioned the Artivist Ashrams. So this is something that happens like regularly every year where different members within the Bodhisangha ecosystem come and spend, as you say, 100 hours. And that has been like a core part then of the process of building these relationships.
One of the core parts has been that we've had 8 activist ashrams, with the first one in 2017. So we could say it's almost like an annual thing where a small group comes. But we have several other formats. So we have a larger format called Gathering of the Tribe. We have a format, Gathering of the Tribe is a 25-30 people gathering. We have Maitri Milan, which actually brings a diverse set of people, not just the tribe, so to speak, because it's again Vinoba's idea of let all the good beings meet. We have Sahaj Ashram, where we live together over extended periods and do practices. So that's something we've just done once. We have a youth fest called 2069, which is like a 50-year vision, and that brings 120 people. So we have a whole range of formats which bring people into relational fields.
Wow, so interesting. I definitely have felt the power of, residencies, even 2-3 day workshops. Recently, I had one in Chiang Mai, where actually, since you reference, different capitals, we also walk through under the banner of reciprocity. How do we think of the different capitals and find that in the room we were all rich in so much capital that we had yet to really recognize,
Right.
whether it's
Yeah.
spiritual capital or experience capital or material capital. Perhaps the one that was lacking the most in the room was the financial capital. But seeing actually that maybe we can enable collaboration without needing that one capital, because there's 7 others as we had 8. So then we can start to collaborate, and that was quite powerful.
Yeah. And it also in some ways maps back to the Indian or Indic way, where you value all forms of capital, right? You value relationships, you value connection to nature, uh, and and you design your life to have all forms of capital. Money is help. Money is a pathway to help you live out your karma and reach moksha, right? Right. It's not dharma, arth, kam, moksha. It's one of the 4 enablers, right? So I think there is a place for, we need to relocate financial capital. I think it's taken over too much, and really it was supposed to enable, but it's right now blocking things from happening.
Nice. Yeah, I think the relationship feels really strong to me. I want to come back a little bit to your journey, the story of Abhishek, if you will. Like, you've repressed reigning in the ego, working with yourself. What was the moment where you started to see the world differently? What was the moment that your Indic mind became activated? Like, where did you, because you grew up also, like, like me, in modernity in Bombay, a city where, I mean, it feels so far away from the Indic roots. Other parts of India perhaps are quite different, but Bombay feels very, very far away from, this Indic view that we talk about. And I can see, speaking to so many friends in Bombay, or in my own experience in Bombay, where that scarcity mindset really is at the core. Like, driving on the road, if you don't take that spot, someone else is going to take it. And like, oftentimes there's no generosity or abundance in that way. Perhaps it comes in really hard times, like when it floods or something like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, like, take me back a little bit to how your Indic mind has started to take root.
Yeah, I mean, so I've had an early start in school itself. My parents initiated me into different forms of spirituality, Chinmaya Mission, Anapan, and even Western self-help, Deepak Chopra, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success and stuff. And also in 90s, there was the Earth Summit and the Enron Dam. So I was writing in the local newsletter, whatever little the school student in me would understand, and a part of the Cub Club. And so very early starts, and then an extensive exploration. I think I've explored the UN summits in Brazil and New York, and I've also done padyatras with tribals in India asking for land rights. And so it's been across geographies, across the ideological spectrum also, from Asia Social Forum to the libertarians and to the right as well, right of center. So I've extensively explored, and that's shaped me a lot. To see things from so many different perspectives, to organize across South Asian Youth Conference. We organized first in Bangalore, and the next one we hosted in Pakistan, in Islamabad. And that was one of the most phenomenal experiences of organizing with Pakistan, friends from Pakistan. Like, oh God, this has been like, it's a stretch for us and them both, right?
Yeah.
So there's been extensive exploration. I think that's shaped me. The most defining experience of my life has been my bipolar mania experience, right? So I have a diagnosis of bipolar. It's quite severe. I've had manic episodes, and manic episodes of bipolar are particularly difficult because they knock me out of consensus reality, right? You're kind of hallucinating, going paranoid, all kinds of things happen, right? And but one of the gifts of that, I feel, is when you come back to your senses after the whole depression and the medication, and then you kind of balance. You're like, so much of this is made up, so much is constructed, so much of our reality is just us agreeing to an arbitrary set of rules, either handed down, and you're like, whoa, all this seems to be made up, and we've made it up this way, but it could be made up in so many other ways, right? So I think for me, bipolar makes me feel that there are energies beyond my comprehension, right? And there's something way beyond what we can perceive that's going on. And these archetypes, these energetic forces are playing through us, right? So there's certain surrender and humility also, saying, how do I be a receptacle for the right energies, but not have the hubris of saying I know, because I don't know. I can only sense signals. And I think so that's kind of definitely been the other thing. And it's also forced me to live my life with a lot of integrity and authenticity, because in bipolar, one loses grip over life, right? Because you don't even know your own moods. The mind with which you make sense of what's going on itself is swinging. So sense making gets impaired, right? So to solve that, it's a very wicked problem to solve. Bipolar is a wicked problem to solve, and it needs a very complex solution. But in solving it, certain muscles did get developed, right? So some of that has helped me kind of get perspective outside. The Indic piece was a natural calling. I think as I hit my mid-30s, I started feeling like, hey, I am so colonized and I've not really connected to my own roots. And therefore, I started this project called the Rediscovery of India, where there were a bunch of podcasts, and I wrote my own version of the Hind Swaraj, Gandhi's Hind Swaraj. I said my Hind Swaraj, saying I'll give my own take, and why not? Everybody should write their Hind Swaraj. You know how Gandhi just step by step things. We should think it through. So, and then there was a lot of yatras, a lot of traveling, a lot of reflection. And I've realized a lot of my learning has been through transmission from elders, right? So I've had experiences with elders, and when they happen, they just seem very trivial, or very small, and then they kind of energetically they find root, and they take root at a level where it starts guiding life. A lot of Vinoba, for example, for me, Vinoba is one of the biggest influences in my life. I've hardly read Vinoba, but I've met elders who've been with Vinoba, and at different points of time, they have kind of intervened. I have a very juicy story I'd love
Can
to
you share a little bit about Vinoba? Because actually, I'm not familiar, and maybe some of the listeners won't be.
Yeah. So Gandhi, most people are familiar with, and Vinoba is called Gandhi's spiritual successor, right?
Okay.
And the way I think about it is that Gandhi is great because he was an ordinary person who had an extraordinary journey and reached where he reached. Vinoba was already born with a lot of gifts, purely Indian product. Like if you look at Gandhi, Ambedkar, Nehru, all of them have been abroad and kind of assimilated. Vinoba is very Indian, somebody who knew 14 languages and could recite Gita at 12 and so on. And I think what Vinoba figured were few very important things. I think he figured that the centralized model of leadership, where we put Gandhi at the top, worked temporarily, but once Gandhi was gone, it was a chaos. And he said that doesn't work, right? We need to be, what he would say is, we need society to be like a moonless night where each of us can glimmer like stars. We don't want the moon that shines so bright that it drowns everything. So his conception of a multi-leader, multi kind of world, his idea of led the largest land donation movement in the world. He said, I'll just go out and I'll go to the zamindars and landowners, and I'll come from love, and I'll say, hey, if you have 4 kids, make me your fifth and give me 1/5 of your land. And the total amount of land Bhutan was able to mobilize was the size of Scotland.
Wow.
Like that much land in India. And these are selfish zamindars who would not want to give their land. And then Vinoba comes and just asks from love. right? His one of his books is Moved by Love, because he's like heart to heart, right? Connecting heart to heart. And after Bhudan happened and land went to the poor, a lot of fights erupted, a lot of land got grabbed back. And that's when Vinoba said that we need to build collective consciousness. This is not getting solved by a few big leaders. If humanity really has to rise, we have to really till the soil and build collective consciousness. And that happens through collective decision making, that happens through dialogue. So yeah, so Vinoba for me is all about love. Gandhi's my experiments with truth. I think Vinoba is our experiments in love. So he's taken, so is Gandhi like one level further refined, right? And and I've had the privilege of meeting elders who walked with him in Bhutan, and I've not met Vinoba obviously, but I've met these elders, and I feel a lot of this Indic energy is through transmission, through small encounters here and there, uh, and yeah, and how those encounters play out over life. I wonder if we have time. A very short story, but a very
Yeah, please,
influential one for
please.
me. Yeah, I'd love to. So there was one of these retreats where I was invited, and I was among the youngest, and all like rocking social workers, and also I was very proud. Like I'm like, whoa, I made it. Right? I was feeling like okay, I was feeling like that Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic, right? Like I just won a hand, and I'm now on Titanic, and I'm feeling all cool. And there was an elder called Arun Dada there who had walked with Vinoba, and everybody was regarding. I don't think he noticed me. The 60 people retreat. So we went to Gandhi Ashram, and people are putting these, hand spun malas on us and celebrating us. So obviously I'm like all floating in the air saying, I have arrived. And so then suddenly somebody taps my shoulder and I look and it's Arun Dada, right? And I thought he didn't know me. And so he said, Abhishek. I was like, oh, he knows my name. That's even more cool. So he says, Abhishek, माला उतार दो जो तुमने पहनी. He said, क्यों अरुण दादा, ये माला तो पहना ही है. He said, नहीं, अब जरूरत नहीं है इसकी. So I said, मुझे माला पहने में बहुत अच्छा लग रहा है. So he said, अभिषेक तुम विशेष बनने का वक्त खत्म हो चुका है. अब तुम साधारण बने. पर मुझे विशेष बनना है अरुण दादा. So he said, विशेष बनना हीन इच्छा है. It's a lesser wish. राइट तो तुम ये माला ले दो और अब से साधारण बनना शुरू करो and he walked away and I was so shocked by that interaction because I really thought about what it is to be special and to be ordinary, right? And his invitation to stop feeling so special.
Yeah.
And for me, like when you ask me which are occasions where the ego breaks, this is where it breaks, right? When an elder says, okay, now stop being so cool and like give up your specialness towards ordinariness. I was profound because it's like receiving something from somebody who's worked with Vinoba in a very direct one-on-one. Like it's not a 10 coaching session journey. It's just one interaction,
And
which
he
is
just
like,
walked up to
and he
you
walked
on
up
his
and walked
own.
away, and there's no preface, no gyan. There's just 1 2 minute incident, and I carry it in my life today. And I'm like, wow, am I acting out of being special? Or am I holding my specialness lightly and I'm located in oneness and ordinariness, right? So I've been privy to so many of such beautiful like transmissions from elders. Yeah, it just, I mean, it's just such a gift. It just makes me so emotional I feel so grateful
Yeah.
to have all this transmission to me. So a lot of my Indic work and all has just literally been elders coming and blessing me and transmitting their ideas and energy to me.
Wow, what a story. I
Uh,
mean, in fact, one of the questions that I thought I would ask you would be how you found that path of service, like how you chose it. And I think clearly the story seems to answer a big part of it, of like messages from elders around you who've helped guide you.
think I was also very self-help obsessed in college, and like I want to hack the life and make the best life I can, kind of a zone. Then I had somebody, an elder, say that, Abhishek, if you make your life great, but if the society is in disrepair, then is there a point to that life? I said, not really. I mean, it'd be good to be successful in a successful society, not in a failed society. But so I said, what do I do then? He said, समाज बदलना है तो लोगों को संगठित करो. If you want to transform the society, start organizing people, क्योंकि संगठन में शक्ति है. Together we are stronger. And that's what Blue Ribbon also kind of has its credo saying, together we are stronger. So I think that was very early where I moved from self to society. I stopped getting self-obsessed and I said, hey, this is about something beyond me. And I think to me, the social change journey started there in sense of saying that I have privilege, but let's make this world better from the space of privilege. Let's not make this a self trip. Let's make it a we trip. So these are all small encounters that I guess life sends and we attract and then we assimilate. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think all of us, I can certainly speak for myself, which is this challenge of sometimes even coming into service or coming in to help each other, but from a false sense of service, or coming in with this unconscious seeking of image, these kinds of things, and then they corrupt. And as you mentioned, like, that's the ego is so sneaky. Like my teacher often says, like the CIA, it will cause coups when you don't realize it, and then it's
Beautiful. Yeah.
and sometimes I'm harsh with myself and it'll be like, oh, like here I am again. But then at those moments, trying to like still be kind and see each moment as a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say the ego is fairly sneaky, right? So when we come into social change, also a lot of times, including me, right, to signal that I'm doing good for the world, for fame, recognition, attention, and I think they're all legitimate for their own age and stage. I think for me, where at this moment I am is really a space of I can't help it. Kind of space. On one end, that is from a space of abundance, saying, wow, life is so kind and so gracious that, like,
Mm,
my club cup is overflowing. I'd love for all of humanity to experience life the way I am. And I think that my life is a microcosm of the future I'd love to bring, right? And I'm like, yes, this is my abundance. The other I can't help it is that I feel so deeply disturbed and upset about what's happening, and it affects me so badly
mm,
that there's no way I can hold that anger and pain.
mm,
I'm building that capacity to do that, but it moves me to action, saying I can't chill when there's so much suffering around me. It's not happening. I just can't get myself when so many of our brothers and sisters are in difficult times. I feel I have to give the best I can.
mm,
And I've over time learned that giving the best doesn't mean burning out. Giving the best doesn't mean like fun.
yeah.
It's a marathon, right? So I have to hone my instrument through which life will serve. I have
Yeah.
to really stay steady. But yeah, I think this is a journey. It'll keep evolving, right? For each of us, where we are coming from.
Can you speak a little bit more on the honing of your instrument? Like, how has that worked for you? How has that evolved?
The honing of the instrument really is about there's a small story I can't not share, right?
Stories are the best. I have my tea here.
Radha and Krishna are the eternal love affair. Once Radha starts feeling envious of Krishna's flute,
Mm,
because she says that I also meet you only time to time, but your flute is always with you. So you love the flute more than me. Then Krishna smiles and says, yes, because the flute is empty and allows me to play my music through it.
mm,
It has hollowed itself out so that my music may flow through it. And that makes me wonder, saying, how much of am I able to be a receptacle and a channel through which divine will can flow?
yeah.
And the more I kind of get out of the way, so to speak, and allow that energy to flow through me, the more I serve, right? And honing the instrument means a couple of things, right? One is building my skills and abilities all the time so that I become a better instrument, but also keeping it cleaner and cleaner, right? Lesser of
Mm,
the egoic self is there. So my energetic imprint is there, my skills are there, but my egoic self I'm trying to kind of clean up so that I become like let things flow from me. And I've learned that being a good instrument is also being able to regulate the kind of energy that comes, right? So with bipolar and all, I've realized that if one really plugs into the field, energy of what wants to happen flows so much through me, at least when I feel it. I'm not able to hold it, and then it leads to all kind of mental health issues. So I have to learn to regulate and hold boundaries,
mm,
do practices, daily practices and regular practices to yeah. So being an instrument is like
yeah.
multiple things simultaneously so that will may happen. And also most importantly, not saying I am doing the change,
Mm,
but I am a channel for change to happen through me. It's a
mm,
very different space, right? Where something wants to be born and it's just using us to be born. We
yeah.
just, yeah. So that I would say is self as an instrument of change.
Wow, I love that. And I like that you used the flute because, in fact, just yesterday my teacher used the same example.
Ooh,
So I feel like there's messages coming to me.
yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
we're sort of reaching towards the latter half of the close of our journey, but it's awesome that we've covered a lot of ground and going into also your own personal journey, which is really interesting. Maybe I have a few questions about India. I mean, we talked about the Indic mind, but I would love to hear from your vantage point about what you're seeing and observing of India today. Particularly, maybe the two questions that come to me. One is about the youth. Since you work so closely with youth, I'm very curious, like what the young Indic minds are like, because they might be quite different, perhaps from my generation or other generations. And maybe that's where you get some of your hope that you alluded to earlier. And also, and I'll be the skeptic here because, from reading of India from afar, or even seeing India and when I visit Bombay, it can feel certainly more worst of times than the best of times. Whether it's, the Modi government, whether it's the kind of violence that's happening in Kashmir, the kinds of centralization of media. I mean, we could really go on and on. Like in Bombay, the air pollution and like the water, the earth, everything seems to be suffering. Yet you also refer to this unholy alliance. You refer to how you are actually finding a lot of power in working with the mainstream, and I totally recognize that like you are building your light forest world, and so I want to get a glimpse into your light forest world, and maybe at the very least it can become a WhatsApp forward for the WhatsApp groups with other Indians where everyone's kind of in this very doom and gloom, very like hateful mindset, and it's like actually maybe there is some seeds that everyone is people need to hear about more.
Yeah, I think one of the ways to make sense of what's going on in India at this moment is from a very archetypical and deeper historic arc. If you take out the first 1,000 years and go to 1100, 1200 kind of AD, you're seeing hundreds of years of prosperity, peace, and so on. And then we've seen a couple of invasions. We've seen invasions come in from the west first, and then the colonization, right? And the two waves. And I feel they've shocked the civilization, saying, what the hell just happened? We were always friendly and we were kind of gentle people, and we got like the Indic right would call them people of the desert, right? Abrahamic religions and people of the desert coming from conditions of scarcity and fears and
Mm,
meeting a civilization that's abundant, right? Really, like, I feel your relationship with nature changes how we look at the world. So,
yeah,
nature is harsh, you're harsh. Nature is
yeah,
harmonious, you're harmonious. And when these two civilizations clashed, and similarly, a civilization that was from lack, relatively speaking, which is Europe, to abundance, where they came to extract. So, these two waves, I think, affected the Indian psyche very deeply.
mm,
And there is a lot of guilt, there is shame, there is anger, there is frustration, there's a need to reassert, right? And to come wake up to our senses and say, shit, that was hard. And let's shed it off, right? Let's shed it off, let's shake it off, and let's assert ourselves, right? So this moment and this wave, what we call the right wing wave,
yeah,
to me seems to be a moment of assertion. And of course, moments of assertion are disproportionate, they go extreme,
mm,
and they're like, so I read this moment and this larger movement in India as a reassertion, a recalibration, a reclaiming. Now, the challenge is that that reclaiming in large part is also colonized
mm,
because it's saying like one book, one God, one version of the religion. So
yeah,
destroying the plurality, and it's almost like a paradox, like a contradiction.
yeah,
But I feel you have to grant that because it's a journey. It takes a while to come out of what's happened, like, colonization, before that, the invasion. So I feel very patient about this. I see this so I'm saying in the longer
yeah,
arc where I see it from, that is where it is. And then India is trying to make sense. I tend to be more generous to our leaders in spite of all the issues that they are. I feel leading is a hard job in today's times, right? So compared to most of my friends, I tend to lean more towards the center, right? Than the center left. And I engage with the moderate center right also.
which, as you also say in your report, the left-right framing isn't
Is
even very
itself
useful
yeah,
for
and that
India.
itself is a very kind of Western framing, a binary framing, right? Where
Yeah,
there is a whole gray out there. Young people at this moment, I mean, I would say people, because of tech, there is much more similarity between young people around the world. And like any Gen Z, we see a lot of fragility, a lot of distancing from the world. Like I feel for them, the world itself is a screen and a YouTube video playing. So you're not as animated because everything is just a screen, I guess,
yeah,
because you spend so much time on screen that the world shows up as a screen. There's a lot of fragility, there's a lot of
mm,
anxiety, there's a lot of side effects of the meta crisis and modernity. Mental health is bad. Employment is so hard because of AI and what's coming. So it's a really difficult time for young people, right? And making sense of the world is hard. So and again, this whole Indian and Indic is not glorifying the nation state of India.
yeah,
It is not about saying East or West India is the best. It's about saying that there's a civilizational memory a civilizational energy that this land has to offer. That's all there is. Right now, you're right, right? The cities are getting worse. It's crazy urbanization, bad planning.
Yeah.
It's a disaster, right? So there is no, I'm not denying that at all, right? So yeah, so it's a difficult time for young people, I would say, and it's a challenging time for India as the global politics is shifting, right? So I would definitely say it's not
Mm-hmm.
an easy time. There are islands of hope, of course, but yeah, broadly, I would agree with your assessment that things are getting worse in many ways. I just feel that changes will be increasingly non-linear in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Just as we say, the adoption of technology, like if you put the radio, then the television, then the internet, then Facebook, then chat GPT, you're like, we're adopting faster and faster.
Yeah.
I feel change will also happen in non-linear ways. I feel like as crises happen, I think we'll leapfrog. At least we are trying to say how could we use every crisis to leapfrog to a better and better equilibrium. So we're not designing Bodhisangha as stable conditions, but as disruptive conditions. And disruptions are climate change is already happening in India, right? Like there are
Yeah.
floods and so, so yeah. So I don't think it's a great time in that way. It's a difficult time. It's a
Mm-hmm.
highly polarized society. And at the same time, I think anchoring in a larger context gives me some peace, some hope, and not as either being nihilistic or naively optimistic, but in the sweet spot of taking action, acknowledging the realities. Like, yes, realities are stark, even
Mm-hmm.
more reason to act and hold hope.
Beautiful. And where do you find your best allies in India or globally?
I mean, I feel more understood globally somehow. I
Mm.
would have done way more podcasts with people outside India, like as a guest, than
Yeah.
people in India, because I somehow that seems to be the case that new ideas have to first come from outside to be recognized. I'm like, I don't know what that means, but I've found a lot of allies, or what I call the nameless tribe around the world, like people like you and all of us, right? There's an energetic recognition.
Yeah.
That tribe is also in India, right? And now I'm finding that tribe is not just in the NGO world, it's
Mm-hmm.
across society and government, and there are people who are awakened to saying what the hell is going on and another world is possible. They've located themselves at different places, and I think allyship is energetic. You
Mm-hmm.
energetically recognize somebody else who's playing a non-zero sum game, who's on your team, and when you're able to energetically start recognizing, then you're able to conspire faster and better and align better and try to kind of play together. So Bodhisangha is kind of trying to do a little bit of that, right? How do you wink at each other so that you can energetically recognize and
Mm.
play the game? So we say, that you're not the same team. We're all different teams, but we're like a meta horizontal team that's actually playing to move the game forward.
Yeah.
So you're playing in your team to win, but together you're cutting across to move the game, to change the game. I think there are
Because as
lots
I
of
read
people.
it, you're trying to transform, transform the game as it were. Yeah.
But while playing the game, you can't sit back and be a commentator or an
Yeah.
audience and transform them. You have to play the game simultaneously, uh, and have members from other teams playing their games,
Yeah.
but secretly kind of or almost conspiratorially nudging towards when all teams want a different game, the game will shift, right? So in every team, you need a couple of members who are saying, hey, is this game even making sense? And that's
Mm.
the meta team we are putting together. That doesn't belong to one team, but it cuts across all teams and
Yeah.
then shifts the game.
Yeah, in the past, I had a guest who talked about the two loops framework for system change by Deborah Wheatley in the US, which talked about how you have this team, let's just say, of change makers who come together, and there's those who are hospicing the old system,
Hmm.
and then those who are creating the space for the new system,
Right.
because like as the systems are declining and falling, people are fleeing and they need spaces to go to, and so both of them happen simultaneously. So it sounds like you're quite involved actually in both
Yeah.
sides of both hospicing and also creating new spaces.
Absolutely. And this is where, say, the Indic mind will not look at it as the world, right? It'll also look at it as saying, in myself, I'm hospicing parts of myself that are dropping
Mm,
away and birthing new parts. In my relationship, I'm constantly saying which parts of this relationship drop and which ones come in. So what
mm,
I'm doing at the world is not a separate exceptional thing. This is life itself. That's what the Indic mind is able to kind of, I don't know, mental model a world that is
yeah,
holographic and multi-level,
yeah,
right? So I thought I'll use that chance to plug in
yeah,
Dick
yeah,
White and how it looks at this. So absolutely, it's a two loop thing to do that simultaneously
yeah,
and to grieve, right? With that, to grieve and hope simultaneously. Hospicing is like quite sad and like there's a lot
yeah,
of grief,
yeah,
and to hold that grief along with the excitement of birthing the new together, not
yeah.
just give in to any one. I think that's also the work.
Yeah, certainly my work as well. And yeah, I'm filled with, like, I certainly get filled with excitement when I have conversations like this. I wrote recently that it's conversations like this that are so uplifting, both in just the conversation, then the editing, putting it together, like just listening to this high frequency stuff, like really helps me keep myself up. But then there's the grief that you talk about. Certainly our bodies in some ways are so numb. Like we've become so numb to actually feeling so much emotion. Or at least I certainly speak for myself of seeing how I am not able to sometimes tune into sadness or tune into anger. But it's there, it's just suppressed. And then oftentimes it gets projected outside. And perhaps that's what also bringing back that Indic view that it's what is in us gets expressed. The world is in relation. And if we are not able to tune ourselves, tune our instrument, then we are going to project more outside and perhaps even create a bigger mess than you are contributing to the cleanup.
Yeah, and that's where a community becomes important. I think in a community, what happens is it's like your expanded self. So
Mm,
somebody will get angry on behalf, like they're getting angry. You think they're locally angry, but they're holding something for the whole,
yeah.
right? Like you had these Rudalis in India who would be invited to cry and weep when somebody died because the people didn't want to cry. So it's somebody who could channel into the space and cry.
Mm,
So I think a community is an antidote to these because we are small. In a community, when different energies show up, then the community can explore saying, hey, this person is holding anger on behalf of all of us and
mm,
serving the whole, right? So I'm a huge proponent of community as the ground to practice the relational field, to bring out all parts of ourselves and
mm.
almost like project yourself outward to and see, okay, here's 10 parts of me in my consciousness doing things, right? So yeah, so strong, I think strong for community in these manners to feel truly.
Yeah. Wow, it seems like you've really built over time a very sophisticated social technology for the internet, as you talk about, like for being able to create powerful community, because certainly there's so many challenges that come about when you have so many people in one space and energetically
Absolutely, yeah,
and so forth. And so like you've created these different tools to help regulate and
yeah, yeah,
languages as well, because if you
yeah,
don't have the
yeah.
language to describe it, then you don't know what you're dealing with.
True, true.
Yeah, super. Well, yeah, I've really, really enjoyed this walk. Thank you for sharing so many stories and so many metaphors from your like deep lived experience. I hope this message can, travel far and wide. What would be your invitation to engage to people who might be listening to this? Like, how would be the best way they can interact with your ecosystems, with your communities?
The global work is Bodhi Sangha. So bodhisangha.org.in would be the place where the mycelial network is forming, and always the invitation is to connect, come over for us to show up. So that would be the easiest entry point. I felt also that it helps when we send sharp signals to each other, so that because there's so much, like it's a problem of plenty, right? In terms of
Yeah.
collaborations and possibilities. And I feel like the deeper the signal and the sharper the signals, we're able to truly collaborate, not just satisfy curiosity. So
Mm.
how do we send better signals to each other so that there is a meeting, right? So I think I would invite that. We are also trying to send out very specific signals into the universe saying, hey, this is what we are looking for. So I think that would be a great place. There's a vast bunch of resources, podcasts, reports, and so on. We're coming out with a relational field playbook that talks a lot about how do we build relational fields as well.
Wow.
So we put out a lot of our knowledge as well. In India, we would love if in the NGO sector, WisdomTree does the same ideas at an NGO level, building collective wisdom, helping organizations be resilient and future ready. So yeah, NGOs in India can engage through WisdomTree in Mumbai, Blue Ribbon. Hopefully they would have heard of, or if not, they can reach out to brmworld.org. So yeah, that's kind of.
Super. I think we'll definitely link them in the show notes, and I certainly will keen to browse the creating the relationship field, toolkits. I think this is something that's definitely needed. I think people are yearning for it, and it's if we can benefit from the experience that you've built over the years, I think we'll be much wiser, and the planet will be much better off. So thank you very much, Abhishek,
Thank you for
for
having me,
sharing.
and thank you so much for doing this, for being so curious, and yeah, just opening up the space. I think it's our podcast. It's the space that we both together evoke in each other. So
Yeah.
I think that was very, very fulfilling and joyful. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for sharing. And for listeners, this was the Light Forest podcast. I hope you got a sense of the kinds of energies and the kinds of possibilities that we like to explore. If you're still with us, thank you for making it to the end. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. These tiny signals help indicate to us that we're onto something. It definitely helps me feel good when I see that, and also it helps signal to the algorithmic overlords that this content should be seen and heard. So thank you in advance for doing that, and we'll see you around in the forest for another walk in 2 weeks. So with that, thank you and bye.